Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. This video is a continuation of my previous video, and in this video we are going to be talking about block and inline level elements, and we are also going to be discussing about two main attributes that are there for all HTML tags, classes and IDs. So if you haven't watched the previous video yet, then you can do so by going into my channel and checking out this playlist. So I have created this playlist for basic front end for beginners. You can click on it and you would see that there are two videos right now. So this is the third video of the playlist. And without any further ado, let's get started. So every HTML element has a default display value depending on what type of element it is. It can be either block or inline, right? So let's first talk about what block level elements are. If I scroll down here, then here you would see that block level element. So a block level element always starts with a new line and the browser automatically adds some space. You can also say a margin on top and the bottom of it, right? So a block level also, element would also always take full width available to it. So if let's say the entire screen width is available to it, right from this left section to the right section, then it will take the entire width, as we have also seen with some examples as well. So if I go into my HTML file, I've removed everything out of it. So if I build an h1 tag with, let's say, a style of background color is equal to black, and I say hi in this one, or demo in this one, and I also add another property called color is equal to white, right? Then I would notice that this is taking the entire width that is available to it, right? It's currently, yeah, so right now it's set on 100% zoom, and it is taking the entire width that is available to it, right? Some width from top and bottom, some margin from top and bottom has been added. If I, let's say, inspect it, I can see after hovering on it, after clicking on this button on top left section. If I hover on this, I can see that this orange part, which tells us about margin, some margin has been added on top and bottom of it, and it is taking the full width that is available to it, right? So that's the basic of a block level element. Now let's just quickly talk about some block level elements that are there. So there are quite a lot, about 29 block level elements that we have in total. There could be more, but I've listed down these. So the first one that we can see is the address element, right? So this is simply to, if let's say you want to uh, mention some address that is there, then this can simply be used to, mention that address, in newspapers and things like that. It has a certain font that is used in it. It has a certain, italics formatting that is used in it. So if I use the address tag here, and let's say I add new Delhi and then India, right? So it just makes the text look a bit different, right? I can, if I zoom in, I can see that this is a bit italicized and maybe some other font style is used. I'm not sure, but that's the basic address tag that is there. It's a block level element. So after address tag, if I, let's say, write something, if I, let's say, write something literally, and I save this, then here I will see that that text write something is on the new line, right? So it is a block level element. It always takes an entire line that is there. Everything after that, it's going to start with a new line. It takes the entire width that is available to it, right? So that's the first block level element. The second is article. So if let's say you're writing some sort of article, you're quoting some article, maybe taking a section of some article or something like that, then you can use the article tag. And these tags, the major thing that they do is that tell the browser that, okay, whatever is written here inside this is an address, or whatever is written here inside this is an article. So it just tells the browser, it helps with the semantics and things like that, but it's just some formatting, some pre-formatting that the text comes with, right? Then again, a semantic tag that we have is for aside. So whenever we have a sidebar of some sort, right? If let's say I go on youtube.com itself, right, youtube.com, then I can see that it has this entire sidebar that is there, right, for home, shorts, subscriptions, and then library, history, whatever it is. So it has all these uh, items in the sidebar. So if I want to, let's say, build a sidebar in my website, I can use this aside tag that will tell the browser that okay, this is going to be a sidebar in the web page or something. Then we have a block quote. So block quote is again to write some quotation in a block, you could say. So if I use a block quote tag and say this is a quote, right? Then it will come as a quote. So you can see that there's some space before it, right? Because quotations, they have an indentation before it, before writing something. So I can say that this quote is from Apoorv Goyal, and then I can write some quotation here. I can say that code is never wrong. Right, code is never wrong. Let's say, let's keep it short. So you can say that it has a bit of different it has a bit of different formatting than the normal paragraph text that is there. It is taking up some space before it that we can also call an indentation. Right. So that's our block code text. Then we have a canvas. Canvas is usually used to create some charts in your web page or something like that. If let's say I want to create a chart, that chart or whatever drawing that is there inside it, it's going to be inside a canvas. So that's again like uh, used for drawing and other stuff. A chart is a basically drawing a bar chart or a pie chart, whatever it is. So it can be in a canvas, inside a canvas. Then we have these three tags, DL, DT, and DD, right? So what does this mean? So sometimes we need to create lists inside our website, right? Lists for some features that we are counting or some things like that. Even if we go into Virtual Tech School's website, right? If I go to virtualtechschool.org, then here I can see that just journey through the road less traveled. Inside it, I've added some list items, right? So just to you know specify some features that are there of this course or something along the same lines. So you have this list available to you, and that is a different list that I'm using there, which you'll be seeing later on in this video. But this is a description list, this DL. So how it basically works is that, let's say I create a description list here. I say inside my p tag that this is a description list, right? And then after this, I first create a tag called DL tag, right? Inside my DL tag, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have two tags, a DT tag and a DD tag, right? So let's say that I want to have 2 points inside my list. So I'm going to copy paste this, and inside the DT, the first thing that I'm going to say is Linux masterclass. Right. And instead of this, I'm going to say that courses available, right? So courses available on my channel, you could say. So Linux masterclass, and the next that I want to do is I want to do the get masterclass, right? So here I can add some description for it that this is an intensive and Linux course that provides you with deep knowledge, right? For the second one I can say the same. This is a course on Git and to understand how it works internally, right? So now if I save this and I go back to in my website, I can see that this is my p tag, courses available, and then I have a description list in which I first say the term that I want to describe, and then the description of that term, then again the term that I want to describe, and then the description of that term, right? So again, this is a block level element, and to create this sort of list, you need to create a DL tag first, inside which there are going to be pairs of DT and DD tags, right? So I can add as many things as I want inside it, and that's basically your DL, DT, and DD, right? Then we have this field set. tag, again a block level element. And this field set is basically for grouping all the elements that are there inside a form. So a form can have a drop down sort of a thing, a form can have regular input fields, a form can have big input fields for asking a person's address or things like that. A form can have some radio buttons, right, to select something. They can have toggle switches, a lot of things, right? And don't worry about how to create these types of forms. We are going to have separate video on forms in HTML, so that will be covering some beautiful forms that we'll create. But this field set is basically to group all the input fields that are there inside a form. Then we have these two tags called figure and fig caption, right? So they are generally to define an image with a caption of some sort. So I can say that this is an image with a caption, right? And inside this, I can simply create a figure tag, right? Inside figure tag, I can have an image tag and a fig caption tag. Right. So I can say that this is a blog image, right? And I can add the image here. I can say src is equal to, I already have an image in my folder here, this blog.png. So I can simply write blog.png here, and I can give an alternative text as well. It is recommended to give an alternative text to your images so that it helps with the SEO, right? So I can give an alternative text. Again, this is a blog image, same as the caption, nothing changes, right? If I refresh this, then I can see that my image is not coming up. And okay, okay, so instead of SCR it should have been SRC. If I refresh this now, I can see that my image is coming up, but we are not, and we are also having the caption as well. So you can see that just because I use the figure tag, it is coming with a little bit of space before it, right? Some indentation that is there, right? If I, let's say, remove this figure, right, and I remove this fig caption as well, and I refresh this, then you can see that the image has moved to the left. The space before it has been compromised, right? If I just remove the fig caption and just add the figure, then again figure just simply add some space before it, and if you want to have a caption, then this fig caption can be used, right? So that is your fig caption and the figure tags that are there. Then you have a footer. Again, footer is a semantic tag. It is used to create a footer in your website to tell the browser that, okay, this is a footer. So in our website, this entire virtual tech school with the bootcamp and everything, the logos for our social medias and all this stuff, this is a footer, right? So in its code, if I, let's say, view its page source, I can scroll down all the way and I can see that for defining the footer, I've used this footer tag here, right? So that is generally our footer tag. Then form. Again, if you want to create an HTML form, then this is the tag that you should create it inside. Right, we'll be separately talking about HTML forms in a different video, so I'm not going to touch base on this one. Then you have your h1 to h6 tags. Again, we have discussed this one. They are used to create heading. H1s are for bigger and more important headings in the website, and h6 are for the least important and the smallest headings that are there. Then you have an header tag. Again, if your website is having some sort of an header, then you can use this header tag. It's for semantic purpose again. Then there is this HR. So HR tag is basically for a horizontal rule, right? And it just creates a line in the page, right? So to give you an example, let's say I have this code already, and after the P I want to add an HR here, right? I want a line in the page, right? If I refresh this and I reload this now, you can see that this line that was not earlier there has been added this time, right? So HR is a simple horizontal rule that you can create. Then you have li, ol, and ul. So earlier we discussed about DL, which is a description list. LI is simply a list, right? And LI is simply a list item. So I could write here that this is a list item, right? And this OL, this is simply an ordered list. And this UL is simply an unordered list, Right. So let's take an example of this one as well. I can say that this is an ordered list. Right. And for ordered list, we can use an OL tag. And inside the OL tag, we can define the list items with a simple li. Right. So I'm using the li tag, and I can say that this is item 1. I can use an li tag and say this is item 2. Right. And I can use an li tag again to say this is item 3. Right. If I refresh this now and go into the web page, I can see that this time I'm getting this is an ordered list. So this is my p tag, paragraph tag, and paragraph tag is again a block level element because the list is coming in the new line, right? And then we have these three items in our ordered list in our OL tag we have the li tags, and we have these numbers before it, right? 1, 2, and 3, which is not selectable. You can see I cannot select the numbers. If I, let's say, try to select this entire line, I cannot do that. If I move up, I cannot do that, right? Because this is coming from HTML. This is my list item in an ordered list, right? Similarly, I can create an unordered list. I can simply say that this is an unordered list, and instead of the OL, I can change this to a UL, right? So UL gives me bulletin points, right? So this time I have the same thing, but I have bulletin points instead, right? And if you see in our website as well, here I've used an unordered list for my points. I've used an unordered list, right? So that was your unordered list. Then if you move on to the next set of tags that are there, we have main tag. Main tag is again used to specify the main content of your website, right? So here you would see that I have used a main tag as well in my virtual tech schools website, right? I have used this main tag which is closing on line number 694, and this main tag starts on we'll have to find where this starts. This main tag starts on line number 297, right? So this is a pretty big website, but I mean contains a lot of HTML CSS code. The code, I mean, you would come across much larger code bases later on in our course itself, but yeah, I mean for beginners this is pretty huge, right? And it starts with the main content of my website starts from line number 297 and ends at 600 and something, right? Where I close my main tag. So main tag is to specify the main content of your website, and similarly you have nav tags to contain navigation links and nav bars of your website. So again, since our website has a nav bar as well, you see this footer, then everything before it is main content except for this nav bar which helps me navigate to different pages, right? So this nav bar, again I have my nav bar inside the nav tags, right, which starts on line number 269. I'll just increase the size. So it starts on line number 296 and then 269 and then ends at line number 296, right? So that is your nav. Again, they are, I mean, the main and the nav and the footer, they are all semantic tags, right? They just tell the browser that this is your footer, this is your main content, and this is the nav bar, right? So you can say that using semantic tags helps a bit in the SEO of the website, but and it's a good practice to use them, but nothing more than that, right? Then you have a no script tag. Again, this is a block level element, and it can define some alternate content if the user does not support client side scripts, right? So sometimes you may notice that if you go to some website, it will first ask you permission to run JavaScript or run some client side scripts, right? You can block these requests, but if you do, then the website can choose to have some alternative content. For example, I mean, I think would be able to show you an example of having this at work, but I can say a no script tag here, and I can say that your browser does not support JS, right? So JS or JavaScript, right? So if let's say there is my website uses JavaScript heavily, and someone's browser is not supporting JavaScript, and I want to display some content to them, if in case it is not working, then I can use this no script tag to tell them that your browser does not support JavaScript, right? If I let's say save this here and I try to refresh this, I will see that I'm not able to see that no script. So the simple reason being my browser enables, it allows JavaScripts to run, right? So I'm not able to see this, but if there's someone who hasn't allowed JavaScript, then this no script tag would be displayed to them, right? So that is there. Then we have the p tag. P tag again, I mean, there's no uh, reason to describe it. We have been heavily using this p tag on line number 23, right? So there's no reason to describe it. We all know what paragraph means. The next we have is a pre tag, right? Which is a pre-formatted text, right? So sometimes what happens is that we want to have a p tag. Right, but let's say I want to write something in it which contains some additional space or some additional, lines that are there. So let's say I want to write it this way. This is the first line, and then this is a second line, and then I have a simple empty line, and this is the fourth line, right? So I have first line, I have second line, then I have an empty line, and then I have my fourth line, right? If I save this and let's say I want to refresh this, I would see that it all comes up in one line itself, right? It says that this is the first line, then this is the second line, and then this is the fourth line, right? So the formatting that I did in my text itself didn't appear, right? So if I want to display this as it is written, because paragraph text is, it removes all the extra spaces that are there, it removes all the lines that are used, extra lines that are used in this text, right? So if I want to, let's say, display it as it is, instead of a paragraph text, I can use a pre tag, which is a pre-formatted text, right? I can use this pre tag, and if I refresh this now, I can see that this time it is coming up in three different lines. So this is the first line, this is the second line, and this is the fourth line. Again, pre-formatted text might be having some sort of, CSS that is available. The space that is coming before it is simply because, I mean, our text editor gives some indentation to prettify things in HTML and CSS, because if let's say that I remove all the indentations here, if let's say my page looks like this, then and let's say it has a lot of code, right? It is a pretty huge thing, then it would very soon become very unreadable. I cannot go through it, right? But this sort of indentation that is there, it tells me that okay, this tag is inside this tag, and this tag contains this data and things like that. So it's pretty easy for me to, just go through the entire thing and see, how things are working and stuff like that. It is also, you know gives me features like Visual Studio Code give me features like, you know closing a part of, an HTML tag that is there. So let's say head is something that I do not want to make changes into, then I can simply close this one, so that it gives me a better readability. But that are, Visual Code Studio's features. Majorly we need some indentations to, make the stuff readable that we are writing. So again, I mean, if I remove these indentations from here, then it will simply, not have that space that I was having there, and it will display it as it is written in the code. But let's not do that and move to the next one. Then if you want to define, a section in the website, so let's say that this entire header is one section, then this join us today is a section that we have, and this, journey through the road less traveled is a section that I have, then FAQs is a section. So it is again a semantic tag that I can use to differentiate my sections that are there. The next set of tags that we have table. right? Which is used to create tables. Now in today's time there are very few use cases where tables are actually used, and instead people are using flex boxes more. So I mean, I'm not going to deep dive into table. If you're really interested in tables, then you can check out W3 school. But later on, when we talk about flex boxes and things like that, then you would get a good understanding of how you can also build something similar. So uh, that represents a table of some sort. Then we have the video tag. If you want to embed any videos in your website, you can do that with the video tag. And finally, we have the div tag, which is commonly used as a container for elements. So this is the tag that we are going to heavily use. I mean, not just we, but all the web developers that are there. Div tag is the most heavily and most commonly used in websites for containing, a set of elements that are there inside it. We'll be talking about it, a bit more later on. Now let's talk about some inline level elements, just like we talked about, block level elements. So unlike block level elements, inline elements does not start with a new line. That's first thing. And it only takes up as much width as it needs, right? So unlike block level element that takes the entire width that is available to it, inline elements would only take as much as it needs, right? So if let's say you create an inline element and you write some text inside it, then the width would be equal to the width of the text that is there. Like unlike taking the entire width that the block level element does. So talking about some of the inline elements that are there, the first one is for hyperlinks or anchor tag, right? The A tag that is used to create links and things like that. So that's there. The second one is for abbreviations. So this ABBR, this is for abbreviations of any sort. I can say that our community's name is BTS, right? Now if let's say I want to specify the full form of this BTS, I can simply add an abbreviation tag here, ABBR, right? And I can, so if I tag this ABBR, then if I refresh this, I can see that nothing has changed, right? So in order for abbreviation tags to work, I need to add a title as well. I can add a title saying virtual tech school, which is our name of our website, right? If I save this now and refresh it, I will see that this pattern of the dot 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 has appeared below VTS. And if I hover on VTS, I can see that it says in a small black box virtual tech school, right? So if you have any sort of abbreviations that you want to, that the user might get confused about, and you want to you know give them the feature of, if them let's say hovering on it, then they see the full form of it, then that's for abbreviations. The most common use case you would see for this would be on Wikipedia, because it contains abbreviations for a lot of things, right? um, so because it is an encyclopedia for everything. Right. Then we have the B tag. This is for bolding something. Right. So instead of using an abbreviation tag here, if I let's say want to bolden my VTS, then I can use a B tag instead of ABBR. Right. It will bold the VTS part for me. So if I again show you the bigger version, you can see that this VTS is bolden out, but the rest of the text is normal. Right. Next, we have this BDO tag. It is used to override the current text direction. So I'm not sure how to use a BDO tag. BDO tag W3 school. They might be having a good example for it. Yeah. So BDO takes a it takes an it takes an attribute called dir, which is for direction, and inside that you can give it a direction of RTL, which is going to be right to left. So I can simply change this to BDO. Right, and I can give this an attribute called dir from RTL, right? And this VTS becomes STV here. So it's displaying it from right to left. So I think the most common use case for this could be to demonstrate some Arabic text. text that is there, right? For that you can use the BDO tag, but I haven't used it ever. Then the next tag that is there is BR. I think BR is something that we have talked about in our previous videos as well, but it is simply to break the line that is there, and it is a self-closing tag, right? Just like the HR tag was. So if you want to create a horizontal line, you use the HR tag, but it's a self-closing tag. Similarly, if you want to break the line in the middle, then you can use the BR tag, which is for breaking the line, right? So here, I mean, inside the body tag, I can obviously, I think this is the random text here, so we can add it inside a p tag, although we can have random text as well without any HTML. But we have this p tag, and after our community's name is, I have a BR and then BTS. So if I refresh it here, I can see that my BTS comes in the next line. So despite it being a paragraph text that doesn't allow any new lines and things like that inside the text, since I've specifically used a BR tag, it is going to have everything after that in the next line, right? So that's my BR tag. Then we have the button tag. Button tag can be used to create buttons, right? So I can have a button tag, right? And I can say that click me here. So I want to have this button. If I refresh this, then I can see that the button is created. A pretty ugly button at that, and it contains the text click me, right? So that's a button tag to create any sort of buttons that are there. Then you have the site. This is again a formatting sort of tag that is used to define the title of the work, whatever work it is. So I can use a site tag here. I can do a site inside a p tag, obviously, and I can say that Linux masterclass by Apoorv Goyal, right? So here, this time, this Linux masterclass comes a bit italicized, and maybe the text font style might be a bit different. I'm not sure, but since I'm defining, I'm like this is the title of the work that I've done. You can use it inside the site tag. Again, this is simply for semantics of the website, so that the browser knows that this is some work that is mentioned in the website. And next we have our code tag. So as the name suggests, this is for any sort of code that is there. Um, and you can say that printing anything in JS is done by, and then removing the site from here. And I can simply make this the code tag. I can change the text here and write a code here, closing tag, and I can say console.log and then hello world, right? So console.log is a simple command in JavaScript which is used to display something into the console, which is a piece of code. So here if I refresh this, I can see that this font style is a bit different, and this is done with the code tag that we had, right? And after that we have our dfn tag. So dfn tag is simply used for the term that is going to be defined within the text, right? So I can change this entire thing, and I can say that inside a dfn tag, not a div tag, inside a dfn tag, right, I can say that Linux master class, and then no, not just Linux master class, I'll just say Linux because I want to define Linux, right? So Linux is a simple operating system, right? So if I refresh this now, I can say that again it just displays Linux in a different formatting, and rest of it is same, right? So nothing special here. So next let's talk about the em tag. Em tag is simply for emphasis, and it makes your tag written in italics, right? For example, this Linux here is written in italics, slanted a little bit into the forward. So that's italics effect for you, italics formatting, and this em means emphasis. So it is recommended to use emphasis instead of the I tag that is right after it. This I tag is making the text italics, but it is recommended to use emphasis text uh, tag instead of the italics tags, simply because it helps with some bot readers that are there that are going to read the text of your website out loud, right? Then again, this image tag that is there, it is an inline element again. So if let's say I have an image tag here, if let's say I add an image tag with the src of blog.png, and I say after that this is some text, right? So this entire thing is going to be displayed in one line where this is some text and this is the image, right? So it's an inline element, the img tag that is there for images. Similarly, we have the input tag. This is also inline. This is used to create an input field for say, taking any sort of input from the user. This is something that we are going to explore deeply when we talk about HTML forms in some other video. The next is kbd, right? So kbd is for a keyboard input, you can say, and it's again some sort of formatting for your text. So inside a p tag, I can say that press, and then inside a kbd tag, I can say control plus shift plus t to open a tab you just closed, right? So if I refresh this now, so this control plus shift plus t is a keyboard input that we are talking about, right? So to specify some sort of keyboard input, we have that kbd tag. Again, I mean something that you might never be using. I never used it, but still talking about it. So this is something, and this is used to this control shift T is used to open a tab that you just closed. So let's say I close this virtual tech school website. If I control shift T, it will open it up for me again. Right. So if sometimes, we close our browser accidentally. So we wanted to, open all the things that we were doing. Right. So that is the KBD. If let's say, I mean, just to give you an example, if let's say I close my entire browser, right? I closed it, I'm opening it again, right? And I'm doing a control shift T here. I can see that all the things that I was, doing, um, actually came back, right? And I can close this one. So that is there. um, for the KBD tag. Then we have the label tag. Label tag is to simply add a label to any input field that is there. Sometimes you might have an input field for an email. You're asking the user for an email, so you can add a label before it that this is for email, right? A text that is linked to that input field. Again, label is something that we are going to take a look at when we talk about HTML forms. Then we have this map tag. Map tag is very interesting, so that is something that we are going to have a separate video on maybe. But it is used for a lot of interesting stuff, and we are going to build something using this. We have a q tag for short quotations. So if you want to add some short quotations, then as you saw earlier, block quote is something that is a again used for quotations, but it is for quotations, for bigger quotations that takes an entire separate line. But if let's say I replace this kbd with a q, then it is going to have double quotes around it, right? So if I replace this now, I can see that this control plus shift plus t is having rounded double quotes, some beautified double quotes around it. So that's q tag for you. Then you have SAMP tag. This is, I mean, if let's say you run a computer program and gives you some sort of an output. So for displaying that computer output, you can use the sample output tag or the SAMP tag, right? Nothing special here. Then the script tag. This is again an inline tag, but it is used to create scripts for client side. This is used for client side scripts, and you can have JavaScript inside it, or whatever it is. You can if let's say you want to add some JavaScript into your website, then you can do that inside the script tag for JavaScript. And next to it we have the select tag. So the select tag is simply again used in HTML forms for drop downs. This is again something that we are going to look at later when we talk about HTML forms. We have the small tag. It is used to make your text smaller. So this Control Shift T, if I want to make it smaller, then I can simply add a small tag here. And if I refresh this, I can see that my Control Shift T has become relatively very small. Earlier it wasn't, right? Earlier, if I again queue this and show you the difference, then you will see that the font size has increased a bit. But if I, let's say, make them small and I refresh this, then here you would notice that it has reduced a bit. The size has reduced a bit, right? So that is there. Then we have the strong tag. So just like emphasis, the strong is used to bolden the text. It is used to make the text bold. And instead of a regular B tag, it is recommended for some purposes to use strong instead, which means that this text needs to be represented as a strong text in the entire paragraph or text or whatever it is. So it does the same thing. Then we have this sub and sup, which is for subscript and a superscript, right? This is for a subscript and this is for a superscript, right? And to give you an example, I can say that the chemical formula for water is H and then a subscript saying 2 and then O, right? So if I refresh this now, I can see that in my text this 2 is coming as a subscript, right? So this is my subscript tag that is there, and I could have also made this made that as a sub, which is a superscript, basically to represent squares, right? So this time you can see that my 2 is coming above, right? So I can say that the area of a square is side and then square, right? So not size, side square. So this time you can say the area of a square is side square. So I wanted to represent the square, I used a superscript. If I want to represent a chemical formula, I can use a subscript, right? Then text area is again something that is used to create a large input field specifically for address or things like that. I can give you an example of this. I can say that I have a text area. Right. And if I reload this, I can see that I have this input field where I can enter, multi-line input or stuff like that. And I can increase the size of it, do whatever I want to do in my website or stuff like that. But that is there for text input, text area. And next we have time. This is used to define specific time. Doesn't does anything special in terms of rendering, but it can tell the browser that you're talking about some time. You have variable HTML tags for variable values, right? Size was a variable in the example that we were discussing about for the area of square. So size was a variable. It could have been represented in the var tag, which is for variables. And then finally we have a span tag, and this is again similar to div tag, the most commonly used container for things, right? So this is again something that we are going to be using a lot going forward. Right, then now let's talk about the div and the span elements that are there, right? So if we talk about the div element specifically, then div is often used as a container for other HTML elements, and it doesn't have any required attributes, but it can use style, class, and ID. So we already know what a style attribute is, and class and IDs are something that we are going to be talking about later in this video. Right, and this div element, it can also it is majorly used to style blocks of content with CSS, right? So I can have an entire block and I can style it, the entire thing, because as we know CSS is cascading style sheet, right? So cascading means that whatever styles that you apply to your parent tag is also going to reflect in all the children tags as well. So it is basically used to style blocks of content with the help of CSS, right? And next we have span elements. So span element is again this is an inline container, you can say. So div was a block level element, block level container, but this is an inline container that is used to mark up a part of the text or a part of a document, right? And again, it has no required attributes, but it can use style, class, and ID mentioned above, right? And it can be used to style parts of text with CSS. So if I have to give you an example, if you let's say take a look at this virtual tech school's website, the website that we are going to build in this course while learning. So if you take a look at this initial text that is there, free education for all, right? You will notice that this education for all is simply a big white text, but this free contains some styling. Right. This free has a gradient from a darker shade of blue to a lighter shade of blue. Right. So in order to achieve this, just style that part of uh, text differently and keep the others different. What I did was I added this free inside a span tag. Right. So if I let's say view the page source of this, right here, if I scroll down and down and down and down, I would notice that this span here free, this free text here, this is inside an h1 tag because this is a main heading inside my website, right? But this free is inside a span tag with the class of text gradient. So text gradient class is the one that is applying all the styles, and we'll understand about what classes are in later on in this video. But the main thing is that this free is inside a span only because I wanted to style it a bit differently, right? So it can be used to select a part of a text that is there. So that are your span elements for you. Now, the next major topic that we are going to be talking about are classes in HTML. Right, the class attribute in HTML tags. It is a very important topic, heavily used. If let's say you want to do use bootstrap later on, if let's say you want to use tailwind later on, whatever you want to use, you'll always be using class attribute for your div tags and h1 tags and whatever it is, right? So let's talk about what class attributes exactly are. As the name suggests, a class can be used to represent a set of elements having similar properties, right? So like, just to take a look at an example, I already have virtual tech school's website opened here, right? So here you would notice that I have these buttons in my website, right? I have this bootcamp button. It is designed in a certain way, right? It has this greenish color in the background or turquoise color in the background, and it has this blue colored text. Right, and I have used this sort of styling at multiple places. This button that is here, it is using the same sort of styles that we want to achieve. Then this button for joining Discord is using the same style. This bootcamp is using the same style, and not just in this page, in other pages as well. This breakdown and the courses, all these buttons are using the same style. In courses, all these courses, they are the buttons here for playlist and explore. They are using the same style, right? So since I have so many buttons in my website, does it make sense that I'm writing all the styles one by one? If let's say I have 10 buttons in my website or 20 buttons in a website, does it make sense that I want to you know uh, write all the uh, styles for all the buttons again and again for each and every button? No, right. And sometimes we might want to have two different versions of a button, right? One for a light theme and one for a dark theme, right? So there's a very important principle in computer science known as the dry principle, which means don't repeat yourself, right? So if I simply Google the dry principle, right? So dry principles, according to dry principle, every discrete chunk of knowledge should have one unambiguous, authoritative representation within a system. Right. This is what the dry principle says. And the goal of the dry principle is to lower technical debt by eliminating redundancies in process and logic wherever possible. Right. So if let's say today I want to change the design of this button, right? Instead of if I would have written 20 stylings for 20 buttons that I have in my website, I would have to make that change each and every place that is there, right? I would have to make that simple change 20 times throughout my code. But this is one problem that can be eliminated simply by using classes, right? And we are going to see an example of classes as well, but the class can be used by JavaScript as well to access and manipulate elements with the specific class name, right? So again, when later on we are going to do some DOM manipulation in our website and things like that, when we start building the website, you are going to understand what this particular line means. Currently I just want you to make a note of it, that the class can be used by JavaScript to access and manipulate elements with the specific class name, right? So that's something to remember, right? And a class is represented in CSS with a dot. So until now we were seeing that if let's say I want to make some changes to the entire body of the page, right? I have some text here. I have a heading here called this is a simple heading, right? I can simply do a body here, and I can say that I want the background color to be black and I want the color to be white, right? If I refresh this now, I would see that it hasn't applied since I haven't linked my sheet here. So I'm going to link it quickly. So I'm going to add this attribute for the style sheet. And this is something that we learned in the previous video, right? So, right. So now, I mean, since my style sheet is linked, I can see that my entire body is having black background and white color of the text, right? So here we say that a class is represented in CSS with a dot, right? So first let's try to understand how a class usually works. I'm going to remove the styling, right? And I'm going to create a few buttons here, right? So I'm going to create this button and I'm going to say button 1, right? I'm going to create another button and I'm going to call it button 2, and I'm going to create another button and I'm going to say button 3, right? If I save this and if I refresh it here, I can see that I have 3 buttons here, right? So now for these 3 buttons, let's say that I want these buttons to have be in separate lines. The first problem is that these buttons currently, since buttons are an inline element, they are coming in a single line, but I want them to be in different lines. So which is the tag that is appropriate for this particular thing? I want these buttons to be in a different line. Just pause the video and think about it. So I guess the tag that is appropriate for this use case is a div tag, right? It is a block level element used to, store some content, some HTML elements inside it, right? So it's a container block level element, right? I can simply add a div here, right? And I can copy paste this entire thing 2 more times. And this time around, my buttons are coming in 3 different lines, right? So that is one thing. Now in order to add a class into this, since class is an attribute for the button, I can simply do a class is equal to and just write whatever name I want to give to this particular class. So I can say uh, button and then base. So this is going to be the base of the button, right? I want to say that I can again give the class button base to this one as well, and I can simply this say give the same class here to my third button as well, right? So I give this class button base, and now if I want to create styles for this particular class name, so that whatever styles I give it here, it gets applied to all the elements that are using this class. I can simply do a dot and then the name of the class, right? So in our case, it's button hyphen base, right? So that is something that I want to do. Now the first thing that I want with these buttons is I want them to have some, margin around them, right? So okay, I can simply give a margin, and then a margin of 10 px I think should be sufficient. If I refresh this, I can say, I'll just zoom in a bit, so I can see that these three buttons are now having some space between them, right? The next thing I want to give is I can give them some padding. I can give them a padding of 10 pixels, right? So now these buttons are a bit spacious inside, right? So that's again a good thing. I can give them a background color. Let's say I want the, or let's say I don't want the background color now, but you see this button that is there, it is having a border around it, right? This border, I don't want my button to have any border, right? So it already has a border, I don't want it to have a border, so I can do a border and then none. So none is a CSS value that means nothing, right? So if I do this time, I can see that my button does not now have a border, right? The border has been removed. So I don't want it to have a border. And yeah, so these are the three things that I wanted to style my button, right? So here you will notice that I just used this one class button base. I created an attribute in all of my three elements, button elements, called class, and I gave the class button base to all of these three buttons. Then I used this class with a dot here, and I added some styles here, and these styles got applied to all the three buttons, all the three elements in which I was using this class. If let's say I create another button, right, but in this button I don't use this class, right? So now if I refresh this, I can see that I have another button, but since I'm not using that class there, it is coming out to be same, right? Let's say I call this button 4, so it is coming out to be the default button that is there without any styles here, right? Now I can add multiple style names to my element as well by a simple space in the middle, right? So if I, let's say, add another layer, and I say that I want the color of the button to be red, I want the this color to be yellow, and I want this button to have a color of navy, right? And let's say I give this only one class to this button as well. Give this the class of button red, right? So I have three classes now, three additional classes: button red, button yellow, and button navy, right? So what I can do is I can create styles for these button red, and I can say that I want the background color to be red for this one, and I want the color to be white for this one. I can do a button yellow, which is my second class, right? I can say that I want the background color to be yellow for this one, and I can say that I want the color to be black. So since by default it is black, I don't need to change that. And I can also do a button navy, which is my third class, and I can say that I want the background color of this to be navy, and I want the color to be white, right? If I save this and if I refresh this, I can see that my first button with class button base and button red is displaying a red button with the style of the base as well, and I can see that my second is displaying the styles of button yellow with the styles of button base as well, and my third one is displaying my button navy class with the navy color with the styles of my button base as well. But this fourth button, in which I didn't apply the button base class, right? It's just the button red class that I've applied. It is not taking the styles of button base but only button red, right? So I can add multiple classes as well. So you can also give multiple classes to an element by separating the class name with a space, right? So all I simply did was I added a space and introduced a new class, one more class into all of these, and all of these buttons, and this way I added multiple classes to my same button. So the common styles that were there for all the buttons is something that I created in one class, and the styles that were, unique to those buttons that I created in a separate class, right? So that is something that you can do, right? And moving forward now, I mean, if we just talk about classes for a bit, then after seeing what we just did, and after a bit of practice as well, when you would start to actually build websites, you would start noticing that how heavily classes are usually used, right? Whatever styling you need to give to any of your HTML elements or stuff like that, no matter what framework you're using, if let's say you're just using vanilla HTML CSS, then also classes are something that are pretty important. And if you're using frameworks like React JS or things like that, then also, I mean, this is something that you are going to be heavily using because it helps a lot in classifying different HTML elements into one and then applying styles into all of them in a way that you don't have to make changes at multiple places. So if let's say I feel that I need to increase the padding, I'm not satisfied with the padding that these buttons are having, and I want to reduce the padding a bit, right? For all the three buttons, I'm just going to change the padding from 10 px to 5 px, right? And if I save this and refresh here, I can see that with just one change in the code, it got reflected in all the places, right? So styles are very important in that sense. Now let's talk about the next attribute that we have, which is the ID attribute, right? So ID attribute, unlike a class that can represent multiple elements, right? ID attribute is used to specify a unique ID for an HTML element, right? So this ID is like a unique identifier for that HTML element, right? And you should not have more than one element with the same ID in an HTML document. So that's like a sin. It's not like your website is not going to work if I have the same ID in multiple elements. An example for that is that I can give it an ID and then say button. Right, I just give an ID called button and then I give this an ID as well called button. So if I want to do something like this where I want to give the same, name of the ID to the button, I can use a class instead. I can instead, instead of using this ID, I can just give button here and then button below it as well, because I can give as many class names as I want. But ID is something that is unique to the element, right? So it defeats the purpose if you're using the same ID for multiple elements. And it is recommended that each and every element, if you want to give an ID to it, it's not mandatory to give an ID to all the elements that you have, but if you're giving it, then each and every element should have a unique ID associated with them, right? So that is there. And it can be used to point to a specific style declaration in a style sheet, right? So just like a class points to a specific style declaration, but since class can be used by multiple HTML elements, all the elements, the class points them to specific style declarations. For an ID, you can be specific. You just give an ID to an element and then apply some unique styles through style sheet based on that. And it can also be used by JavaScript to access and manipulate the element with the specific ID. So again, this is something to note, this is something to remember, and later on when we'll be doing DOM manipulation and things like that, it will make more sense how things work, right? In DOM manipulation and in JavaScript, how ID attributes and class attributes actually help in JavaScript for DOM manipulation, right? So that is there. And it is represented in CSS with a hashtag. So just like classes were represented with a dot, this is represented with a hashtag, right? Now let's say that I want to, this button yellow and this button navy, this is something that is specific to the button, let's say in our case, right? So I can, instead of using a class, I can simply have given an ID called button and then yellow, right? Because I'm not using this anywhere else, right? And I could have given this an ID of button navy, right? I refresh this and if I reload my page, I see that my styles are gone this time, right? Why? Because I'm still declaring these styles for a class, not an ID, right? So to declare them for an ID, I can simply replace this dot with a hashtag both for button yellow and button navy, right? And if I refresh this now, I can see that my styles have come back. One more thing to note here is that I replace the button yellow class with the button yellow ID, and I replaced the button navy class with the button navy ID. But I didn't do that for button red, and that is simply because button red is a class that is being used by multiple elements, right? So since this is being used by multiple elements, if I do this ID and then button red, right, and if I again do this ID is equal to button red here as well, right, and I replace this dot with a hashtag, since now I mean I'm talking about a class, and I refresh this. I can see that it doesn't really affects anything. I mean, I use the ID button red and I'm using that ID in two places, and still the styles are getting applied in both the places, but it's still fundamentally wrong because it defeats the purpose of having an ID in the first place, right? So that is there, and if let's say you're using some external extensions or something like that for your HTML, for your CSS, for linting it, or for helping you write it, for making corrections and stuff like that, then they are going to also show you some warnings for the same, that you are having same ID for more than one element, right? For more than one HTML element. So it is recommended that you don't do that. And let's make the changes here again. We don't want this button red to be a ID, since it is being used for more than one place. We want it to be a class, right? So this is better. This is perfect, right? And here you can also see that now, I mean, if you talk about the differences between a class and an ID, then the major difference between a class and an ID is that a class name can be used by multiple HTML elements, but an ID name must only be used, must only, right? So it's not like it cannot be, but it must be only used by one HTML element in the same page, right? So that's there. And finally, let's talk about HTML bookmarks with ID and links, right? So you may wonder that since classes are already so powerful and they can be used to apply the same styles to more than one elements, then if you want to, let's say, apply styles to just one element, then why use ID at all, right? So I mean, that's one question that will be answered when you learn about DOM manipulation as well. But more importantly, IDs can also be used as HTML bookmarks, right? So it is used by a web page to allow readers to jump to a specific part of a web page, and they can be useful if your page is very long, right? And to use a bookmark, you can give an ID to any element, and that element should be the one that you want to bookmark, and then add the link to it, right? And you can add links from the same page, or you can add links from some other pages as well. So let's quickly take a look at an example. One example is our virtual tech schools website as well. If I go into the bootcamps page, then here you would notice that I have these two buttons. One is for courses and one is for breakdown. Now if I click on courses, it takes me to some other page, right? Pretty simple stuff. But if I click on breakdown, as soon as I click on it, you would see that it has scrolled me down automatically to this polyphasic course and then the description of the courses, right? So if let's say someone clicks on the breakdown, if I click on the breakdown, you can see that it automatically scrolled me down, right? I didn't have to do anything. So let's see how this actually works, right? Let's say that I create a button and I give it a class called button base and button navy, right? So this is a class that I want to give to my button, and I can say that click me, or I can say scroll down in this button, right? And then I can have a pre-formatted text with a lot of lines in the middle, right? Lots and lots of lines, and then I can have a paragraph text saying that surprise, right? Something like that. Now if I refresh my HTML page, I can, on 100% reset, I can see that I have this button called scroll down. uh yeah, I'll remove this hashtag to dot because it's not letting me display the style. Okay, so let's see why the styles are not coming up. Okay, so I added a space between button and navy, right? One, I mean, that made it two different classes, button and navy, right? So if I have had a hyphen in between, then it becomes just one class, right? Now I can see that this surprise is pretty down, not as down as I wanted it to. So I'm going to add some more enters here, right? So now you can see that the scroll down is here and I have to scroll all the way down to check my surprise that is there, right? And if I click on here, nothing happens, right? So what I can do is I can add an anchor tag here and I can close this anchor tag here. I can add an href here and in the href I can do a hashtag and then surprise, right? So what I'm doing is I'm linking this anchor tag to an ID called surprise. And similarly, in the p tag down, I can add an ID called surprise. Right. Now if I refresh this and if I click on the scroll down, I can see that it automatically scrolled me down to the surprise. So if you focus here, then here you would notice that here currently I'm on the top. I click on the scroll down and it automatically brought me bottom. Right. I can do it from some other page as well. So let's say I create a new file called index1.html. Right. And I add the entire thing here and with a exclamation and then enter, that creates the template for my HTML document. I create a button here. First I create an anchor tag, inside that I create a button, right? Inside the button I say click me, right? And in the href here I can simply do an href and inside the href I can first tell it that what file am I talking about. So I'm talking about index.html here because this is index1.html. So I'm talking about index.html and inside that page I want to go to the hashtag surprise, which is an element with the ID of surprise, right? I save this now and if let's say instead of my index.html, I go into my index1.html here. Then here I have this button called click me. If I click on it, then it takes me to my index.html. Just take a look at the URL. Be observant about the URL here. So I have a URL called index.html. If I click on it, it takes me to index.html hashtag surprise, right? So I'm automatically scroll down in that page to surprise. Otherwise, if I let's say remove this hashtag surprise from here, right? And if I go back here, I let's say refresh the page and if I click me here, then this time it is taking me to the top of the page, right? So the scroll down was happening because I added a bookmark into my link. I said that I want to go into index.html, but inside it I want to go into hashtag surprise, which is an element with the ID of surprise, right? So and again if I here click on scroll down, I can see that it scrolls me down to surprise, right? So for better viewing purposes, I'll again display it, but with zoomed out. So here I have a button called scroll down and you can see how large of a scroll this is. If I click on it, scroll down, I can see that it scrolled me all the way down to surprise, right? And if I go into my index1.html, I'll again 500 this. If I click me on this, it takes me to scroll down because I have removed the hashtag surprise. If I add the hashtag surprise here, telling it that inside this page I want to go into an element called surprise. And if I go back here, I click me, then here I can say see that it has taken me directly into surprise, right? Scroll down all the way to the bottom instead of displaying me the top, just because I added that hashtag surprise. And even in the URL you will see that index.html hashtag surprise. So if I enter this, right, then by default this should take me to surprise, right? So guys, that's pretty much it for this video. In this video, we talked about inline level elements and block level elements, and we also talked about what class and ID attributes are and how they are essential when you are styling your web page and creating HTML bookmarks. Uh, in the next video, we'll be talking about the box model in HTML and CSS, and it is a simple trick that it is a simple exercise that we are going to do in the next video, which is going to enable you to think how most of the websites are built. And after watching that, if you still struggle with cloning websites and things like that, then you would be able to clone most of the websites that are out there. That's a thing that I can guarantee you, right? So that's pretty much it for this video. In the next video, we are also going to start building our virtual tech schools website. Um, which is this one, right? So stay tuned for that. And if you learned something in this video, if you liked what you learned, then do make sure to write a tweet about it using hashtag learning with Apoorv. You can also tag me in those tweets on Twitter on Apoorv tweets. Right. So at the rate Apoorv tweets is my handle on Twitter. So do make sure to write some tweets about it. Do make sure to write a nice blog about whatever you learned about classes and IDs, how they can be used and things like that. Do make sure to, mention all the attributes that we talked about. It is a part of your learning, and sharing what you learn is also essential to maintain consistency and things like that. So do make sure to do that, and whatever content you're creating, do make sure to tag me in that with hashtag learning with Apoorv, and Apoorv tweets to tag me on Twitter. You can also, if you're writing about it on LinkedIn, then you can mention me there as well. I'm from the name of Apoorv Goyal. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'm pretty excited for the next video, since we are going to be talking about box model, which is going to enable you to create most of the websites that you are cloning. If you still struggle with it, then that is the video that you should watch out for, because it's going to be amazing. And till then, have fun, do a lot of learning, and keep building, keep learning. And I'll see you in the next video. Till then, peace.